Okay, so I am excited to get us started. My name is Rob Dietz, and I'm the program director at the Post-Carbon Institute. It's my honor to host part 2 of the Dirt on Soil. I'm really excited to be in conversation about regenerative farming and healthy soils, specifically how individuals and communities can protect soil locally, nationally, and even globally. So just a little reminder, part 1 took place last week. That featured David Montgomery and Bianca Mobius-Clune. They were outstanding, I thought, and they covered topics about like why we find ourselves in trouble when it comes to soil health and agricultural practices. And they explained regenerative agriculture and why it holds promise, not just for rebuilding soil health and supporting robust food systems, but also for the climate, for watersheds, and really the whole range of social, environmental, and economic systems. So in part 2 today, we're starting from the position that you all pretty well grasp at least the basic concept of regenerative agriculture, and that we all kind of think it's a pretty good idea, right? And today we want to focus on how folks can move from kind of learning and understanding things to doing things that help regenerative farming replace the damaging and unsustainable practices of industrial ag. And in taking action, we can think about projects big and small. We can move up in scale from the backyard to the neighborhood, to community, ecosystems, watersheds, nations, and even the whole world. So I want to get us started. And first of all, thank you to our 3 panelists who I'm going to introduce in just a moment here. Thanks to all of you out there for registering and joining us today. And thanks to those of you who have donated. If you have been able to make a donation, you'll get a video link to a recording following this event, along with the list of resources that have been addressed in the previous webinar and this webinar as well. So today's agenda, we're going to do this in a kind of Q&A conversation. First few rounds, I'll be asking our guests some questions to draw out ideas about how to take action toward supporting regenerative farming and building healthy soils. The last round will be your chance to our audience to ask questions. And Daniel's in the background. He'll help me monitor your questions. Please put those in the chat box. We're using that, not the Q&A box. And we've also got some questions that were asked ahead of time. And I'm sorry to have to say we won't be able to get to all of them, but please do feel free to ask your questions, and we'll get to what we can. Okay, enough preamble from me. Let me introduce our guests and get you all going. First off, Don Smith is a speaker, teacher, and student of regenerative agriculture and regenerative lifestyles. He applies his lifelong knowledge, advising Kiss the Ground, teaching and supporting course development for various Kiss the Ground education initiatives, including the Soil Advocate Training course. His talks are always engaging, inspiring, filled with hands-on, viable solution to the world's largest problems. I'm glad to have you here. Linda Bilsens Brolis is the Senior Project Manager for the Composting Initiative at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, or ILSR. Her work focuses on advancing composting at the community level as a tool for reducing waste, regenerating soils, supporting local food production, and fighting climate chaos. Linda manages ILSR's Neighborhood Soil Rebuilders Composter Training Program, and she led the development of their new Community Composting 101 online certificate course. And glad to have you here as well. And Reggie Hazlitt-Marroquin is the founder and co-executive director of the Regenerative Agriculture Alliance. Also the co-owner and co-founder of Regeneration Farms, Tree Range Chicken, and author of In the Shadow of Green Man, my journey from poverty and hunger to food security and hope. In 2018, Reggie was awarded one of the prestigious Lifetime Ashoka Fellowships for pioneering the poultry-centered regenerative agriculture system. And I've gotten to speak to all three of you. I have a warm place in my heart for you as people and for the amazing work that you're doing. Super excited to have you share some ideas with our audience. So let's jump right in. This kind of first round, I want to focus on origin stories and your journey to becoming an activist. Maybe kick us off with a little inspiration. So, Don, let me start with you. As noted, you have been an educator on all things regeneration with Kiss the Ground. Can you describe your origin story a bit? How did you make a career in life? Lifestyle turn toward being an activist in regenerative agriculture?
Well, if it goes back to when I first got interested in soil, it was just going to the farmer's market and tasting different people's produce and realizing, like, why is this farm's tomatoes better than everybody else's? Or why is this farm's strawberries better than everybody else's? And I'd studied lots of different sustainability things over the course of my life. Green building, I mean, I grew up in a passive active solar home with a composting toilet. Before that was popular. I guess it's still not popular, but anyway, just had a lot of different experiences and studied all sorts of things: wastewater treatment, alternative energy, alternative transportation. And when I came across soil as being this thing that could solve so many problems, global problems, it was fascinating. And it got to soil because I was curious about why this food tasted so much better. And I started visiting farms. And it was like, that was the epiphany. It's like, I knew food came from soil and I was into organic, but I didn't really get just how important that soil, that living organism, the skin of the earth, is to really everything, all the major cycles. And it's basically the most cost-effective solution to climate change there is. So as I kind of, pardon the pun, but dove deeper into soil, it was just something that I felt everyone needs to understand. I'm always, rooting for the underdog, whatever that might be. And it's like soil microorganisms, they're the underdog, right? They don't have a voice. No one hears them screaming when they're getting poisoned or tilled or anything. And I just felt like there's a better way. And once I saw that, like, regenerative ag, there is a better way, and it's so much better. It's like the biggest no-brainer, and people weren't doing anything about it. I was a master gardener. I did a lot of teaching things, but nothing that was at scale. And I got called into living room in Venice, California. This was about 9 years ago, to give a presentation on soil and compost. And they also want to know about vermicompost. And I was like, great. So I gave a presentation to this group of people much younger than I, and they were so excited after my talk. I was like, okay, who are you people and why are you so excited about this stuff? And they said, well, we heard about soil as a solution to climate change, and we're trying to find out as much as we can because we live in the media capital of the world and we want to do something about it. And I could tell they were serious. And this group didn't have a name. They were just a bunch of people that were passionate. And I said, can I be part of this group? Well, that group became Kiss the Ground and made a film called Kiss the Ground, or helped make a film called Kiss the Ground. And so it's been pretty exciting to see what a small group of people can do, which is, that's how change happens around the world. And that just, I was already sort of an activist, but I wasn't reaching enough people. Like, being a master gardener, you're talking to 5 or 10 people at a time, maybe, if you're lucky. And they're worried about their 100 square feet, which is important, but it's not really impacting enough people. I didn't feel it was impacting enough people. And, now having a platform like Kiss the Ground, we're making a difference, and you can see it. I mean, we're visiting Congress people and House of Representative people. It's amazing at the transformation. So it's just inspiring. Every mind matters. That's what I like to say. And reaching more people, one at a time. I have conversations all the time with one person and it lights me up. It's regenerative to me when that little light bulb goes on in their head and they're like, oh my God, I didn't understand. And when that light bulb goes on, you just change somebody's perspective for the rest of their life. And that is how change happens. So did that answer your question, origin
Yeah,
story?
thanks, Don. I think you reiterated something that's I found over and over in my career too, which is you never know when something that you share, that you tell, something you know is going to affect somebody on a really deep level. So that's, I think one of the lessons I hope everyone here takes away is, you know, as you learn more and understand what healthy soils can do for us, that you share that, just like you did, Don. You know, you entered a living room, talked to some people, and wow, now you have a, you know, this really effective large organization working to address the topic. Yeah, so thanks for that. I really appreciate that. Linda, I kind of want to follow with you because you're also a public educator. Maybe I can call you a guru of composting and soil regeneration as well. And I think of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance as a really wonderful sister organization of the Post-Carbon Institute. I'm wondering if you can tell our participants how you made the turn to this role in this life of activism.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. Being called a guru of anything seems pretty lofty, but I'll take it as motivation to keep learning myself. And I don't have the beautiful background picture that Don does, but I did put together some pictures for you all. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And so what you'll see here, I am going with the truly origin story version of this answer. Can you see that picture?
Yeah.
Great. So this is a picture of my daughter playing in a creek here in West Virginia. And I share this here, not only because I think she's beautiful, but because I think one of the critical sort of things that got me on the path that I'm on today is growing up spending a lot of time outdoors. And this is a gift that me and my husband are trying to give our daughter. Another sort of reality that I think has influenced me from the very beginning is I'm the daughter of political refugees. My parents and grandparents fled the Soviet occupation of Eastern Europe. And so growing up and hearing their stories of their lives being completely upended and things out of their control really, I think, instilled in me a deep need to find self-reliance and learn what that really means and what that looks like. So in reflecting on this really fun question that you posed, Rob, this is kind of something that came up for me. But so later on, when I went to university, I studied at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, and I studied natural resources and environmental sciences there, focusing on the human dimensions of those issues. And at that time, I think climate change was really becoming something that was being talked about sort of broadly. And so studying what I was studying at the time, I learned about what we knew at that point about the impacts that we were having on the planet. And the prognosis is not good. And I don't know if it's just the place that I was at in my life, but I did not come away from university with a lot of like clear solutions to the problems that I had just been that had been laid on my shoulders in some way. And so I left university, and I don't want to put this on the university for not better preparing us per se. I think it may have just been where I was at in my life as well. So it's hard to know looking back on it. But so anyway, after college, I was hungry for real solutions and things that I could get my hands into. And around that time, I also fell in love with the man who is now my husband, who is out in Colorado in the solar industry. And so this is a photo of me taking a dip in a high alpine lake in Colorado many years ago now. But In Colorado, I got into energy efficiency, which was great. It still wasn't getting me the experiences that I was seeking. But in Colorado is where I caught the bug for community supported sustainable agriculture. I worked at a great farm to table restaurant there and worked at one of the farms that provided produce to them as well. But still, so in the few years that I was in Colorado, I think I felt like I witnessed firsthand some major shifts in the climate that growing up in Illinois, I didn't really see because Colorado is such a much more delicate of a climate. But in the few years that I was there, we went from having a distinct fire season of a few months a year to it basically being able to happen at any time in the year. And there's a lot of factors involved in that, but to me, that was really impactful and really just kind of pushed me wanting to learn more about what were other communities experiencing and what are some of the solutions that could be applied. So this slide shows just a collection of photos from travels that my husband and I took 10 years ago to basically see what's going on in other parts of the world and learn about permaculture and renewable community scale renewable energy through biogas and composting and water filtration projects that could be run by local organizations and permaculture and natural building. And this is where I really started learning about how important composting was to growing your own food and the true essence of self-reliance. So coming back stateside, we felt really like we had to really learn about how to do that. So we had seen what other people were doing elsewhere. When we came back, we landed in Washington, D.C. This is our garden there. And we really tried to do a deep dive on, intensive crop production for our household. We got plugged into an amazing community gardening and urban farming scene that exists in Washington, D.C. through family. And we got plugged in and really were able to learn from others and also share with others what we were doing. And sort of a crowning moment of all this was getting visited by Michelle Obama, First Lady at the time. It was definitely a surprise to say the least, but it was definitely a big morale booster that we were kind of on the right path, that this was getting attention. So the top two photos here show First Lady Obama in our backyard. The one on the right shows her checking out our compost sifter that my husband had designed. And then in the bottom, you see me and my husband at the White House garden afterwards. I mean, beautiful, beautiful garden. Talk about beautiful. And so around this time in Washington, D.C., I started working with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, kind of continuing on the thread of finding more self-reliance in my own life and wanting to help others find that for themselves. And since then, I've just had the great privilege of being able to learn about and work with some of the most inspiring people in the country that are working in this space, specifically through composting and community scale composting, but people who are helping feed their communities and help solve some really existential problems in their own communities using composting as a tool for that. So I'll leave that there.
Thank you, Linda. Really appreciate that. I something that comes away so clearly from your talk is all of us involved in sustainability, involved in environmental science, some aspect of caring for the world around us, we can all end up in this place of where the soil ecosystems beneath our feet. It's one of the key areas to address. So I'm really excited to jump in more in a bit on how we can all take action. Reggie, I gotta turn to you, and I mentioned in the intro that your book is called In the Shadow of Green Man. The subtitle of that is My Journey, I should say your journey, from poverty and hunger to food security and hope. I'm wondering if you can describe some highlights of that journey that you used as your subtitle.
Sure, thank you so much. Rob and Post Carbon Institute. It's an honor to be here with you guys, and Don and Linda. It's great to share this space. And I just hope that the words that we share will be respectful of our ancestors, that they will be in honor of everybody in this group, and that they will inspire those who are still to come and take part of their journey on this planet. So with that, I did not come into this to be activist. I'm simply doing my life journey. It's not, to me, it's not about being an activist or being on any specific path except my own journey on this planet as a expression of the immense and never-ending energy of the planet, which gives us birth as expressions of that energy and the flow of such energy. That understanding, that spiritual grounding, it really defines my existence as an organism indigenous to this planet, indigenous to the earth. I am of the soil, and I will hopefully return to it. That is a fundamental principle of living, that when we abandon that, then we start being afraid of things like death and things like that. When we disconnect from our indigenous birthright, indigenous meaning of the planet, being made of it and belonging to it. And then, of course, there is native peoples who are from different parts of the world, who are native to a certain specific territory, and they belong there. And that space is really where that indigenous way of thinking and being and relating actually gets expressed. And so for me, always has been, as a migrant here in the United States, as an immigrant, I'm still indigenous to the earth. I'm not native to this space, but I can still be indigenous to this earth because there's only one. So my journey has been really within that context of understanding that we do not work with nature, that we are actually nature itself, that we are not outside of it. We are simply one of those expressions of the living systems of the planet. As a living system, yes, we are taking over, and we are at the verge of actually destroying the very body that feeds us, similar to how viruses destroy the body that feeds them by overpopulating and then collapsing. I mean, we're still behaving that way, but it doesn't mean we have to, because we have that indigenous intellect that allows us to understand who we truly are in the context of the living systems of this planet. Now, yes, I was born in extreme poverty in Guatemala, in the northern rainforest. I grew up in those conditions, but extreme poverty from the perspective of the Western world. I believe I truly, I'm grateful that I grew up in the most wealthy, spiritually wealthy environment that ever existed. And that spirit in that place with that level of spiritual wealth, really economic wealth is irrelevant. And so in the opposite end of the spectrum is this colonizing system that is really destroying the planet in the name of food, in the name of feeding people, destroying the very foundation of the ecosystems that could deliver us such ability to feed the world. And so that is really not a theory. That is simply a way of being, of thinking, and of doing things, which is counter to our indigenous origins. And so we are both born indigenous and colonizers, and it is the one that we feed, the one that ends up dominating. And that is what defines my journey. Yes, within that context, we were struggling for food at the beginning. And yes, we did what everybody else was doing around our area, which was cut the forest, slash, burn it. We did that for only a few years, and then we went back and realized that was the road to nowhere. We started replanting everything. And by the time I was a young teenager, we had started securing our food and our nutrition. And I owe that wisdom, to that wisdom, I owe the fact that I did not become a statistic of the Guatemalan children who went malnourished and died at an early age. And in fact, it is to that way of thinking and being and relating to those that ecosystem that I owe the fact that I have a brain, because for the most part, you may be alive, but mentally so disrupted that you really can never process the same way as somebody who grew up in a more privileged situation from other perspectives of seeing privilege. I consider myself to be, in that journey, I went from poverty and hunger to food security and hope, but it's not just about the stuff that we eat. I don't think of food as necessarily food. I think of what I eat as nutrition. And when I go to the store, I am seeking nutrition, not food, for my purpose of either acquiring or growing. What I put in my body isn't the filling of the body, but the nourishing of it. And the nourishing of it only comes from the food that I eat was grown with integrity, meaning nutritional integrity. And for that to happen, it has to be done within the context of the geoevolutionary, biophysical, and chemical processes that define how energy is transformed from non-edible forms into the edible forms that we harvest and put on our table. And so my journey from poverty and hunger meaning not necessarily the traditional understanding of poverty. The hunger, yes, to a certain extent, but we solved that by thinking this way. And then, but I was always hungry for these ways of living and understanding the world. And that to me has been the most abundant and most given way of living in this time and this transition of the planet and our own transition as humanity, when we have to come to grips with the fact that we are so spiritually poor that all the economic wealth in the world is going to mean absolutely nothing because of the way we have destroyed our spirituality and our spiritual grounding that actually makes us who we are as organisms of the planet. My journey is exactly that. I feel wealthy to the extreme today, not money in the bank or properties or ownership of anything. That means nothing in the context of us as living creatures of this planet. That's my journey. And yes, I can say because of that way of thinking, yes, I eat good food. I live a very happy life. I live in Minnesota. I am stewarding a farm. I'm also stewarding a whole system we're deploying across the Midwest and beyond. This is regenerative agriculture design center on this very sets of principles, criteria, indicators, and verifiers that ensure that we can scientifically validate to the one of the questions in the chat, can we prove that regenerative agriculture is the answer to climate change and stuff? No, we don't have to. The earth itself is the proof that it works. Before we came and disrupted this planet, it was okay. Not ever stay in a state of paralysis and constant, but in a constant state of changing and evolving, but in balance. We are the ones who threw it out of balance. And the processes of the earth are so powerful that even with a few years of living a space to start to regenerate, and with using technology and the wisdom of our ancestors to actually reconcile these things we do around the planet, the earth actually is capable of, and the ecosystems are capable of coming back into balance relatively quick. And so, yes, it is the answer. And yes, it is the reason I am not a statistic. And yes, it is the reason I will never do anything else but work in this space, not as an activist, simply as a way of living, as a way of thinking, as a way of relating to you and everyone else, but especially as a way of relating to all of the other relatives, the other living systems of this planet, not from the outside, but as part of their systems as well, for we depend on those systems for our own survival.
Thanks, Reggie. I always appreciate it when there's a chance for me to see things differently. I think when we adopt a deeper understanding, it frees us up to do what we're meant to do. And you see from people thinking, oh, nature's out there and we just need to control it, to people thinking, oh, I have to steward nature or live with it. I liked what you said, Reggie, that we are nature itself. And having that as a worldview kind of changes everything, doesn't it? I got to move us along because we've promised, to talk about what can you do in your own lives and in your own communities. So I want to get us going on some thoughts on taking local action to build soil health. And I want to come back around to you, Don. When you and I were speaking prior to this event, you discussed points of entry, how people can improve soil health and agricultural practices in their communities. And I'm wondering if you can describe some of your favorites.
Yeah, thank you for that, Reggie. That was amazing. So just want to acknowledge that talk. That was brilliant. For us at Kiss the Ground, or from my perspective, like, what do we all do? We eat, right? We're all dependent on food. And that's really what drives our economy, is what do we buy? So if we're out there, whether we grow our own food, that's sending a signal to the market. If we're buying some other food, that's signaling the market, hey, I want more of this. And if you're constantly choosing, cheesy puffs over some healthier produce option that was grown organically or regeneratively, or in some way that's more in alignment with what you know is more beneficial for the planet and all the rest of the life forms on it, do that, right? That's the most important thing all of us can do, is make a trip to the farmer's market, grow your own produce. That's like the low-hanging fruit. It's so easy to do. And if you can't do it, if you're not willing to grow it yourself, find somebody that's doing it in a way that's in alignment with, planetary principles of regeneration. And, you could support tree range chickens, right? Reggie's operation. There's so many different ways to do this. Go find your local community gardens. Find other people. If you don't have land, find other people that might have a lawn that they're willing to let you grow vegetables on. There's just so many different small steps that you can take. And then the next one, the next low-hanging fruit, is get educated. Right? We're not learning this, some of the most important principles in our school system. Luckily, we're working on that. There's lots of organizations out there working on that, getting this into our curriculum. But how can we tell our children, oh, this is important to learn, if we don't even know how to live within our ecosystems, right? This indigenous knowledge that used to be, that was just normal, like you knew how to live within your bioregion. We've severed those ties so dramatically. Luckily, there's still, pockets of that knowledge out there. So anybody can get more educated about this. There's countless books that they can visit a farm, whatever it takes. But we have to be willing, as humans on this planet, we have to be willing to make, and I don't even call it a sacrifice, but take some of that time. Instead of binge watching something, read a book, right? Listen to a podcast. There's hours, probably 100 years worth of podcasts that you can learn from. So it's not the excuse, I don't have time, that's not valid. But anyway, those are some of the examples that I think are pertinent. You have time. I guarantee you have time, because you're doing something and you could be listening to something. I mean, nowadays it's so easy to get informed. So everyone that's here, obviously, they're all taking that step, right? They're trying to get educated. And we have there's tons of ways to get educated, and it's unlimited. Like, the choices are unlimited. You can do one small step for the planet, and hopefully that leads to hundreds. And can you imagine if 7 billion people on the planet all start taking some small action that's positive, and we start acting as positive beings on this planet? Change can happen fast.
Yeah, thanks, Don. I also appreciate any small step that you take that's congruent with your values and what you've learned. That just feels like you're in alignment, right? It gets you into a way better headspace as well. So yeah, really appreciate that. Linda, we've got to talk about composting here. I'm wondering if you can describe how you and your colleagues work to set up these community composting systems, and maybe you can provide a specific example or two of a success story or something that's worked with that.
Sure, sure, happy to. And I'm again going to share my screen. I find pictures to be really helpful for keeping me on task, but also for you all following along. So what I will say, so to answer this question, I kind of want to bring us back to 2014, the very beginning of my time with ILSR, when we partnered with a local urban farm, Eco City Farms outside of Washington, DC, to launch a community composting training program, our neighborhood solar builders program, which was based on the master composter model. From research that we did at the time, there's lots of master composter programs around the country. Some of them focus just on backyard composting. Some of them, a lot of them focus mostly on backyard composting. We were trying to fill in the gap for folks that wanted to work at the community scale, because obviously if you're doing it just in your backyard, that's one thing, and that's fabulous and it's super important. It's a great way to start. It's a great thing to do even if you're involved with a community project. But there are more nuances involved when you're engaging community in a project in order to do it respectfully, in order to do it responsibly. And so we created this program. And back at that time, we were running it as a multi-week program, which is fabulous. You get to really know people. The pictures that you see here on the screen are from the first few times that we did it, a couple times in DC area and then up in Baltimore. But basically we were running people through, building a compost pile. What does that look like? What are your ingredients? What's the ratio? What are the systems that are going to set you up for success to keep pests out? What are the management techniques that you need to do to keep odors down? Because if you're putting a lot of food scraps in one place, there are going to be odors. But like, how do you deal with them? How do you minimize them? And then also on the tail end, how do you know when your compost is done? And how can you, simple things that you can do to test whether it's ready for use. And then also community engagement tips for how do you go about sort of setting up a structure within a group of people that allows you to take a project from beginning to end, to realize this project that you have in your head, and engage a bunch of people in the process. And as an example of somebody who graduated the very first program, Jeffrey Neal, who very well could be listening in on this webinar right now. If not, he'll probably be listening to the recording. But he participated in the 2014 class we did. And as part of the course, we required folks to do a capstone project. So after we did the classroom portion of things, or hands-on stuff together too, you had to go out and apply that information, because a lot of the stuff, you can't learn it unless you're doing it. And so, and a lot of the questions that you're going to have are really going to come up when you're actually doing it. So we had this structure where we stayed in touch with people for a few months after they finished the course, and engaged them, helped try to support them and answer their questions and connect them with people who had answers if we didn't have them. And something that's really important to note, I think anything that's going to be based in a community solution of any sort, it's not just us coming in with a solution, right? Like, we were building on synergies that were already happening, such as the DC Department of Parks and Rec was launching a wonderful compost cooperative program that basically there's several dozen community composting sites around the city where folks can sign up to drop off their food scraps and participate in the collaborative management of those systems. And so we sort of piggybacked or collaborated with their effort and helped Jeffrey set up a 3-bin composting system and a general composting site at the Howard University community garden. And so this site is really important as a demonstration of, so this very ambitious person, Jeffrey, participated in the course that we did together in 2014. From that time, he managed the site to a point where it's diverting several tons of food scraps each year. But we also were able to take officials from different cities to come see the site, to see how this works, that this is possible, that it's not something scary, that it can be beautiful. It doesn't have to be an eyesore, like a little bit of training goes a long way. And so because of his project, we were, it led to work that's going on in Philadelphia, work that's going in Baltimore, work that's going on in Detroit and other cities. He, since that time, has started his own business where he does consulting on-site composting solutions. This is an example of one of the other projects that he's been involved with since then, using an in-vessel system, an in-vessel composting system, but also based at a school, community school garden, basically. And another example that I wanted to bring up of something that we helped to launch, but again, we cannot take all the credit for and should not, is the Baltimore Compost Collective. We partnered with a few local organizations in Baltimore, one of them being a community garden that exists in a site in South Baltimore that used to be a dump site, basically. And the entire, this Curtis Bay neighborhood in South Baltimore has a long legacy of industrial pollution, and there's multiple incinerators in the area and all the health impacts that come along with that, the joblessness that is prevalent there. This community garden, Filbert Street Community Garden, is a green oasis in this kind of setting. And the Baltimore Compost Collective is now managed by Marvin Hayes, who you'll see on the left-hand side. He has been a mentor to youth for his entire life. He is born and bred from Baltimore, and he has, so he continues to manage the project with the support of Ridge to Reefs as a fiscal sponsor. And they are still basically, they're showing youth what this composting looks like. He's also employing youth. He's giving them job skills training. This site is basically collecting hundreds of tons of food scraps from curbside collection service, as well as drop-off sites that he partners with the city to put on. And it's just an amazing example. He calls it the he calls it the Wakanda of South Baltimore. And it's really a beautiful story, and it's definitely worth looking into. He has become, Marvin has become a big proponent for alternatives to incineration, composting being something that really empowers people to take control over their own destinies, in the sense that you don't have to continue feeding this incinerator that's poisoning your children and yourself. And I think he's become an amazingly strong, he's making that point really, really well these days. So I think those are the main things that I wanted to mention. But again, nothing that we've done is just because of us. We're always looking to plug into what else is going on and build on this, and build synergy with the other amazing work that other people and organizations are doing.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. That's really inspiring. It's always interesting to me how you can talk about something like the technical systems and how to set it up properly and all of that. But a lot of times it often comes down to things like collaboration and effective communication and having the time and the energy to put into something. And really incredible to think about that and to be reminded of that. Yeah, I want to turn to you, Reggie. When you and I were talking about your farming operations, your poultry system, I was struck by something you said, and maybe you can go a little further with this. You said that the ecosystem is always teaching you things, and that's made it so that your farm work is marked by continuous adjustment. So I'm wondering if you can talk about some of the adjustments you've made over time to improve soil health and some of those lessons learned and that you're still learning.
Yeah, first of all, let's talk about something that always escapes us, and it is that knowledge. Knowledge today has been effectively turned into a weapon of mass destruction. None of the 83,000 plus chemicals that are now used in agriculture were ever designed by people like my father, who know not to write or read, yet understood our relationship with each other and the planet in a way that no scientist had ever explained to me ever since. Now, what's the difference? He had a lot of knowledge, but also a lot of wisdom. And today we have turned knowledge into a weapon of mass destruction because we refuse to understand that really the wisdom is it comes from the re-indigenization and rematriation of that knowledge. For knowledge without rematriation, meaning making it off the earth again and then absorbing it from that perspective, is totally useless. And in fact, is how we will kill the planet and each other. From weapons of mass destruction like atomic bombs and chemicals to chemicals that we put into the food system. That's an atrocity, and it happens because too much knowledge, very little wisdom is used in this context. And so when we talk about what you just mentioned, all what we call the indigenous intellect, which is acquired not primarily through universities or books, but rather is complemented by those things as long as we know how to use those resources. And the indigenous intellect starts by learning to observe, to meditate on your observations, to internalize those observations with you as part of them so that you actually become part of those observations in that life cycle you're observing. You're not coming to study anything, you are becoming to be part of everything. Those are fundamentals of indigenous intellectual development, is what at the end of the day delivers us the capacity to work and to live and to become again regenerators in this planet, and instead of the people who will destroy it. And so absolutely, the ecosystem is what teaches us everything. Not in the context that we understand knowledge acquisition at the universities, but in the way that knowledge rematriation means you take what we learned at university, you return it to the earth first, and then reharvest it from that ecosystem so that then it will come fully loaded with the wisdom of every creature on that space. The knowledge by itself is a weapon of mass destruction. We can turn it into a weapon of mass destruction. So this is fundamentals. This is 101 mental indigenization so that we can then decolonize the actual actions that we take on the land. 4, the way we think, the way we express ourselves defines the way we do things. And for us to be regenerators again, we have to indigenize that process, because from a colonizing perspective, when you bring knowledge so that you can do X, Y, and Z, and you follow that linear process as we are doing every day, what happens with that in that mental state is that you only get to see this tiny little peephole, and through that peephole, you see the world. You never get to see the other 99% of the possibilities in front of you. Only ecosystems can teach you the whole space. The peepholes just don't work. That's why we tend to always shoot ourselves in the foot, because we are always looking through that miniature space. And because not only is the peephole too small to actually get a sense of how you are going to impact the world on the basis of your daily actions, but also, as you look through the peephole, the length at which you can see is so myopic that you can't even see the rest, not even beyond the peephole itself. So we reduced ourselves to that mental construction that we have been operating on, and that we have designed everything around us to deliver, so that we can not necessarily manage the wealth of the planet, but to extract as much as we can and accumulate in the hands of a few from that emanates, that fear that emanates from the scarcity mentality, which renders us colonizers and effectively the buyers of the earth. So this is where we have to actually reflect in terms of your question about ecosystems. Absolutely, we are even an expression of the ecosystem. Just think about allergies that can be cured with the raw honey, because the raw honey actually is a sampling of the whole ecosystem around you. Why? Because the bees did all of the work of collecting all of that information so that your body could recode its own reactions to whatever is floating around the air around you. Now we have polluted the earth to the point that even the bees can't save us anymore. And so we better save them if we want to be there now. Now, there's a lot of work we're doing, of course, based on this principle. We have engineered a whole system. We have codified ancestral knowledge married with current scientific knowledge to design new ways of not of producing anything. In this case, we're talking about poultry, but not producing chickens, but rather a new codification process by which we store the processes by which energy is transformed from non-edible forms in the form of CO2, methane, nutrients in the soil, waste in the streets or whatever you want to gather that energy from, and then storing the processes by which that energy is then transformed back and reorganized in forms that we can harvest and eat, understanding that for us to have that quick, blink in the time lapse of energy transformation processes, for us to have that expression of energy that we call food, it first became food and will become food again of trillions of other organisms on the planet. And understanding that shared space is really starting to, it really allows us to open the intellect to understanding the lessons that ecosystems can teach us. I'm going to post just a few links. So if you want to follow this work, here's one. It's in the Shadow Green Man, of course. I've been posting quite a bit on LinkedIn because that's another good platform for you to actually go and look at what we're doing, specifically the projects, all of those things that are associated with this work. I founded and run, as you mentioned, the Regenerative Agricultural Alliance. So that is on this other link. And I also have my own family farm. It's called Salvatierra Farms. We're based here in Northfield, Minnesota. And again, we are applying the ancestral wisdom of the rainforest of Guatemala because luckily for us, the biophysical and chemical processes of the earth that ensures that that energy is transformed into expressions that we can eat is universal. It's at the end of the day, the only limit that we have in terms of regenerative agriculture is the planet itself. For regeneration, regenerative ways of transforming energy have existed for billions of years, and it is a planetary scale design that we do not have to engineer. It was engineered for us, delivered to us in perfectly working order. We are the ones who interfere with the fundamental cycles of energy transformation of the planet, which are centered on photosynthesis, the interaction of animals with the photosynthetic products or outputs, and the microbiological systems of the soil, which are responsible for pretty much everything we call food.
Okay, Reggie, you better be careful. Judging by the comments, you're going to have some disciples coming to your farm to witness this and get some additional learning. Seriously, thank you to all three of you for such inspirational ideas, a tour through things that we can all do. And I know I'm excited to continue the journey of what can I incorporate in my life, from eating better to growing better to to collaborating in my community, to closing the loop with composting, to seeing the world differently, getting out of that colonized peephole that I've been stuck in. Such heartfelt appreciation for these ideas. My gosh, time is flying by. We have about 18 minutes left in this session, and I gotta get some audience questions in. Fortunately, I've got one here that sort of takes us in a direction that I was hoping to go, from maybe local action up to some bigger picture stuff. And we have a question here, sort of a politics question, about how can we share these ideas that we're talking about here with policymakers so that they're inspired to preserve and revitalize agricultural land, especially with our rapid urbanization. And I'll also just throw in, I know the Farm Bill is coming up here in the U.S. for renewal. I believe that's next year. So that, maybe some ideas for how we can change things there. So a question for all three of you is, how do we get policymakers on board and get them inspired?
I'm sure Reggie's gonna knock it out of the park, so I'll go first. But our campaign, Kiss the Ground, which isn't ours, it's a collaboration, but Regenerate America, we're actually, that's our big push, is we have corporations, we have most importantly, we have lots of farmers on board and other, individuals, et cetera, but lots of people behind this movement to make changes to the Farm Bill. So, because right now the Farm Bill, for most people, don't really think it's important to them, but it's this huge thing that's, it's over $800 billion over 10 years. And it drives what happens on our agricultural lands, a lot of what happens. And it's currently it's very supportive of what we, whether you call it conventional, I call it degenerative agriculture, but we're basically subsidizing the wrong things, right? And one of the things in the Farm Bill is also crop insurance. So if you're a farmer and you want to do something a little bit different, or that might be considered regenerative, it's actually hard to get crop insurance because you're not following what's considered normal or standard. So there's a bunch of things in the Farm Bill, and what we're trying to do is, it covers social issues, equity issues, a whole host of things that we feel are really important, which promote regenerative agriculture, regenerating communities, et cetera. So that's one thing that we're working on, and we're trying to get all these politicians actually out onto a farm in their district. So they actually go see the difference of what somebody that's actually paying attention to soil health and working in more, in ways that are more in alignment with the natural ecosystem and regenerating their local ecosystem services, et cetera. So when we feel like if we can get people to actually have that connection back to the earth by going out and seeing what a farmer's actually doing and see life on a farm that's grown differently than what conventional ag is currently doing, that will have an impact. So that's something that we're doing. And I think anyone can get involved with Regenerate America, and you can go to our website and find information on that.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Linda, Reggie, you guys have thoughts?
I would love to go before Reggie, because I also don't want to have to follow him up. Such beautiful words. You're very gifted, Reggie. So I guess I kind of wanted to take a step back. Federal policy is obviously critical, right? But like, how do we as everyday people kind of get involved? It's super important to be calling your legislators and being involved in that way. Absolutely. I think another important thing that we have to do is we have to ground truth some of these concepts in our communities. And, we have to, so using community composting as an example, composting is not complicated. But there are some things that you need to know if you're going to do it in an urban setting, or in a setting where you want to be able to bring policymakers or school children or whatever to. And so getting involved with a project and really figuring out what that looks like, how that works. And it's going to be a little bit different in every community. And the needs of the community are going to be a little bit different. The availability to volunteer versus getting people paid, all that's going to look a little bit different. But I think the more over the course of my time, I've seen the importance of demonstration projects. People need this. This is stuff that people need to see and experience themselves for it to mean something. I do think it's also important to have a common vocabulary, especially when it trickles up to policy. Vocabulary matters a lot. And so how composting or community composting gets defined in local laws is really important. We need people who know what they're talking about, who can represent what community composting really is in their communities. Like, they need to be at the table when those definitions get set. And so some of the things that ILSR does, we produce infographics, reports, we provide trainings, technical trainings, we have a podcast, we have regular webinars, and so on. We try to basically bring people into the conversation, get people talking to each other, exchanging ideas, and then supporting them as they build out these projects themselves. We have a Community Composter Coalition, which is a beautiful forum where people who are doing this work can connect with each other and ask each other the questions that they might be embarrassed to ask, but they really need to know. And we also have a policy map, or a map where you can find community composters that we know about around the country. And there's also a policy map of what policies are helping to promote composting and community composting in the different parts of the country. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. And obviously you've done some things right, getting Michelle Obama out in your backyard. Clearly policymakers, or at least influential people, are wanting to take part. So
some of that is luck, for sure.
Well, we'll all take a little luck too, right? Okay, yeah, Reggie.
I think it's the same. I think the mistake we make with policymakers is thinking of them as if somebody different from us. I believe that every person on this planet, when asked the fundamental questions, they probably answer very similarly. And all of those things about climate deniers, about Republicans not believing in this or that, or about Democrats being liberals and things like that, and about some other people being radical. When it comes down to the basic things, I always, and by the way, Don, and I mean, the whole idea of bringing people to the farm it's absolutely critical. I mean, it's hard to tend to a lot of people. I had up to 2,500 visitors before, and we had to stop because we couldn't handle that, and it was taking all of our time. So that's effective in terms of politicians. It's actually more effective to focus on decision makers to bring them to the farm than actually the general public. And if the general public wants to visit, set up different strategies for that, because that time that we need to have with these decision makers is critical, but not because they are decision makers. That is the wrong approach. We have now engaged almost most of the legislature in Minnesota. We have been able to get them to pass at least a few pieces of legislation that allowed us to capitalize the process by which we are now designing at a significant larger scale of landscape impact and also infrastructure for a regenerative industrial development park, meaning like really incorporating the whole codification I was talking about into the actual infrastructure. For us, regenerative agriculture is really not about the land as a first step. It's not about how you grow food. It's actually how the food system's ownership, control, and governance is structured. That's what defines the decisions that we can and cannot make on the land because of policies that then derive from that. And when you bring a politician into that space or decision making, really the question is kind of the biblical parable where they say, no, if your child asks you for bread, would you give him a stone? Now, if your child asks you for nutrition, would you give him a chemical loaded piece of bread or food? If your child just wants to breathe fresh air because now they are born with asthma, would you not want to clean the air? If your child actually is born with antibiotic resistant diseases as a result of the fact that 70% of the pharmaceuticals, the antibiotics produced in this country are actually applied to animals with no need for a single drop of them to begin with. And just we do it because there is a profit to be made out of the fact that we have to eat every day, and that the industrial system that is now extracting all of these resources from our communities never intended to feed us, to nourish us. Its intention was to use the fact that we have to eat in order to accumulate profits. And that is factually provable, scientifically verifiable. The fact that you believe or don't believe in climate change is totally irrelevant. The winds still blew at over 100 miles an hour last week in Kansas. Doesn't matter what you attribute that to. Attribute it to God if you want to. Attribute it to the neighbor that is brown and black if you so wish. It doesn't matter. The wind still blew at that speed, and it's still going to take your barn and your livelihood, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, believing in climate change or not. Those fundamental pieces, I think, are critical. in terms of appealing not to the position of these individuals, but to the fact that this is also their earth. This is also their community. This is also their land. This is going to be their kids' inheritance. What responsible, who being a responsible human being wants to inherit their next generation, the kind of planet we're building today? Just on the basis of that, we should completely revamp the farm bill, eliminate every single subsidy to anything that doesn't support life, load all of those subsidies into life-giving infrastructure, such as all of these things we already have on the ground, the systems we're already deploying that we have laid out for you today. I think that's the conversation we have to have. Not whether something is better than another or this or that, but rather, are we actually building the space and where we as a family can feel realized, we can feel honorable, that we can actually one day say, I did my part. And it didn't matter that I believed or didn't believe in climate change or any of those things, right? So I think we are at a space here where we have proven that the traditional methods where we tried to convince these politicians, like you said, Rob, to bring them along, that doesn't work. You can't bring a politician along. They either want to arrive at this space, or it is like trying to pull a wild horse into a barn. They're gonna be bucking and you're gonna be wasting your energy trying to pull them into the barn. And instead, just put a big sign, remove every scary piece of equipment or whatever from the barn, and let them take their time, walk into the barn and drink the water. And then they will feel like they will feel home. That is the only way we're gonna change this, because so far we are so programmed to fight and confront that all we do is do what wild horses will be done if you scare them before you pull them into the barn. That's the way I see politicians today who don't want to do the right thing. They're simply scared, and I don't know exactly of what, but we need to also understand that those tactics haven't worked. They're actually backfiring, and we absolutely have to change that. So sorry, I did not knock this one out of the park, Don. And so I'm glad that you guys went first, because I am not a politician. I don't even do lobbying, but every politician that has come and visited our space and have interacted with us with integrity, meaning it was their initiative to come, we're working together. And believe me, for the most part, during this last piece, when we got the most support, it was mostly Republicans, because when it comes down to it, it doesn't matter who you are. If you are a farmer, you're gonna get nailed, whether by corporate contracts that are extractive or by the climate change that is resulting from our irresponsible use of the resources of the planet. Or your rural community is gonna suffer because of how we organize ownership, control, and governance. So it doesn't matter at that point. And we are very connected with some of the most conservative farmers and politicians in this region, because it happens to be a human issue. And so I think we're gonna have to connect that way. I think we are proving that it is possible. And then of course we have all of the politicians who are already in this space that need to be validated, with they want their stories to be heard as well. And we are the ones who those stories need to be told to, so we also understand how best they interact and how best they can engage with us. And I think that's the case of Michelle Obama coming to Linda's place, because she didn't need to be brought along. She was already there.
Yeah. Thanks, Reggie. I really appreciate the use of the agricultural metaphor too, the wild horse into the barn. We are running very, very short on time. I want to give each of you, you gotta stick to about 1 minute to say what you want to leave our audience with. Just any closing thought that you think can send them out with a bit of inspiration or an idea to follow up on. Don, why don't you?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot.
I would just say people need to think more holistically, as evidenced by Reggie's answers, but holistic, like if we really look at the whole picture or how our actions affect the planet and all the organisms living on it, if people just thought about solutions to problems a little more deeply, that would be the huge step in the right direction. I think we often, we get focused, it's like, oh, I have this pest, how do I kill it? Instead of asking the deeper question, why do you have that pest, right? And if we just did that in so many different areas and thought more holistically about how does this impact my neighbors? How does it impact the water downstream? How does it impact the ocean? We would do things a lot differently. So that's my simple
Thanks,
advice.
Don. Agree 100% with you on that. Still on that journey to figure it out. Okay, Linda.
So I would say it's very easy to fall into the despair when you are thinking about all the challenges that we face as a civilization. But I think what's really inspiring and what has helped me over the course of my life is finding things like gardening or urban farming or composting in your backyard in the community scale. These are things that you can start doing now. Obviously, starting small, scaling up, but like you don't have to wait for politicians to tell you. I mean, obviously there might be some rules that affect you, but like generally speaking, you can start composting in your backyard and it is meaningful. You're going to learn a lot through the process. You're going to start having conversations with people. You never know who you're going to connect with. I mean, the people that have come through our composting trainings, we need people involved in every aspect of society exposed to this information, and the more that we can positively connect with each other over this information, I think it's going to spread, I can't think of the word, but like it's going to continue to spread. So don't fall into despair. Just start doing something and find other people that are interested in what you're interested in.
Thank you, Linda. Very wise. Reggie, final thought. Oh, you're muted.
Yes, of course, have to be muted. Here's my parting message. Truly, to do the right thing, we have to, one, indigenize our ways, and we got to decolonize our minds. If you're a farmer, be a producer no more. Be a steward of energy transformation. If you engage with money, be an extractor of wealth no more. Build collective wealth to be a partner and ally. If you work for justice and equality, be a savior no more. Be an insurgent in your own colonized world. If you buy food, be a consumer no more. Be a steward of your body, your mind, and your spirit. And we all will be better off.
Okay, I have nothing but gratitude for the three of you for participating here and sharing such an unbelievable abundance of not just knowledge, but wisdom. So thank you so much. To our audience, thank you for joining us today. We're going to have a survey coming out where, of course, you can let us know how we're doing with these webinars, but also please let us know what you're doing or what you plan to do in your lives and in your communities. We love hearing about that. I want to also give a quick shout out to our behind the scenes colleagues here at Post Carbon Institute. Desiree, Clara, Daniel, Amy, Cassidy, they're really the ones who make these events go, and so much appreciation there. So thank you again, all of you who joined us. We do this for you. We really appreciate every opportunity to connect with you. Again, if you did make a donation, you'll be receiving access to videos of both webinars and the list of resources that we've been compiling. So with that, thanks for joining us for this special event on regenerative agriculture and on healthy soils and really so much more. Don, Reggie, Linda, all the best to you as you continue your journey. Again, much heartfelt appreciation.
Thank you, Rob, and everything your org is doing. So,
all right, thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye, folks.